When I was a kid of 7 or 8, my family was visiting my grandparents' farm in Mississippi. The farm was somewhat isolated on a country road, with neighbors about a half a mile on either side. Their neighbor to the west was an older lady, and their neighbors to the east had some kids about my age, so needless to say, I used to spend some time with them. Since it wasn't that far, I'd simply walk up the path to their house, and we'd play or just sit on their front porch. On this particular day, while we were sitting on the porch, a couple of dogs came up to the bottom of the porch and began to bark at me. They were yard dogs that I'd never seen before, and they probably hadn't seen me before either, and they didn't seem to like me. Now, these dogs didn't come up on the porch, but they wouldn't stop barking at me. My playmates didn't seem to mind the noise, nor did their parents inside the house seem to notice, but I felt threatened and became scared. And then I began to yell for my dad. He was down the hill at my grandparents' house with my mom and my sister, but somehow he heard my cries, and as we say in the South, Daddy come a-running. Now, by the time he got to the house, Dad was out of breath, and his shoes had become untied. I remember him putting one foot on the edge of the porch and then the other as he retied his shoes. It's funny how such small details stay with me after all these years. Well, anyway, the dogs went away, and Dad led me home, and everything was fine. We read in the letter of the Hebrews, chapter 5, "In the days when he was in the flesh, he offered prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And when he was made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him." This passage from Hebrews is, of course, referring to Jesus. We know from the Gospels that he was a man of prayer. Often we see Jesus spending time with his Heavenly Father after his baptism, before choosing his apostles, in the garden before his arrest, on the cross. Prayers and supplications, sometimes with cries and tears. As my Father heard my cries and rescued me from those dogs, so Jesus' Father heard him, the one who is able to save him, and raised him from death after his sufferings. Now Jesus is the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. As he obeyed his Father and was rescued from death, so we who listen to Jesus' words, obey him and follow him, will experience him as the source of eternal salvation. As did Jesus in his human nature, we learn obedience from what we suffer, which means that God sometimes lets us experience hardship and pain and the uncertainty occasioned by the coronavirus. But that doesn't mean he won't ultimately rescue us. When my dad took me home away from those dogs, I felt safe. And even though I didn't always obey him after that, I still knew that no matter what, as long as he was able, he wouldn't let anything bad happen to me. And neither will Jesus, who knew pain and fear and who always intercedes for us with his Heavenly Father.